Good morning. I'm Julio Saenz, along with Mauricio Riveros. Today we'll meet Bret Garwood, CEO of Home Leasing, and hear about this growing company.
We hope you will be inspired.
Celebrating leaders in Rochester's unique and vibrant business community. We'll meet entrepreneurs whose passion and perseverance have helped push through life's challenges. Join us as we share their stories and journeys to success. It's time to be inspired.
Hi, Bret. Good afternoon. This is Mauricio Riveros and Julio Saenz. Welcome to our show. We created this show to interview interesting people like you. So if we can start, if you can tell us, who is Bret?
Who is Bret? I'm currently CEO of Home Leasing, which is a development, construction, and property management company. My trade is city planning. So I grew up in Illinois, and for some reason, I've always been interested in housing. And I pursued education in architecture and then city planning, but I've always been focused on community development, especially as it relates to housing. So I've followed that topic of trying to improve the quality of housing, especially in Rochester, because I've lived here most of my life, my adult life anyway. And I've seen the topic from a variety of perspectives. I started out at the Housing Council as a young advocate, where I met a nice young man named Julio by coincidence. But I've also worked for local government at the city of Rochester and for the state of New York, and now in the private sector as a company who develops affordable housing. So that's who I am in terms of my professional life. And I have a wife and two children, and about to become an empty nester when my daughter goes off to college next year.
Fantastic, Bret. That's amazing. You have so much experience in the field. It's just amazing. Yeah, Bret and I used to work together at the Housing Council back right after college. So
yeah, back when we were young.
Yeah, we learned a lot there. Yes, we did. I was going to ask you, so tell us a little bit about Home Leasing, because it's a company, that it's maybe some people haven't heard of.
Sure.
You mentioned a little bit about what you do, but what's the history? What do you guys do? Where?
Yeah, so Home Leasing is this, I think it's an amazing company with this really interesting history. It was formed more than 50 years ago by twin brothers, Norman and Nelson Leanhouse, who are both pillars of the Rochester community. And they started out doing rent-to-own work in the 19th Ward in the 60s. They developed that, company into what became Home Properties, which has owned 50,000 units in the Northeast, mostly market rate. And when they retired in their 70s, Nelson reformed Home Leasing to focus as a family-owned company that's mission-oriented, specializing in affordable housing. And that was 15 years ago. He started with, restarted, I should say, with about 8 people and some contracts to manage some rental properties. And now we own or manage 3,000 housing units, mostly in New York State, but also Pennsylvania and Maryland. We launched a construction company about 7 years ago, and we do affordable housing development primarily. In Rochester, you'll see a lot of our work in downtown on the Inner Loop. We've developed 4 properties on the Inner Loop: Warfield Square, Voters Block. We've got properties that are coming to completion in Penfield, but we are very active in the Albany area right now, as well as Oswego and Owego. So we do work all around New York State. We've got about 200 employees. We've doubled our number of employees in the last 3 years.
So very active in the Rochester area. And one of the biggest challenge that we are facing in Rochester is minority participation, and how your organization and your company is helping with the minority efforts, the involvement of community, the involvement of minorities in the jobs. So how is your organization doing regarding to that topic?
Yeah, that's actually a critical topic right now. I think it's one that we do a lot on, but certainly not enough, and we want to do more. As a construction company, especially one that's funded principally through the state of New York, we have some very high standards for minority participation in our construction contracts. So we work to achieve and usually almost always exceed our 30% requirement for minority and women-owned businesses on our construction contracts. But we also are active, we have a very diverse workforce, and we're trying to make sure that we become increasingly diverse by doing more outreach throughout the whole organization. You know, our residents, especially in the city of Rochester, are principally minorities, and working to try to improve the overall community, not just build affordable housing, but be part of something that's larger, is also a real priority for us. We don't like to just be a developer. We're trying to be part of a community for a very long period of time. We will own these properties basically forever. And we want to have a positive impact on the community. We've worked to do job fairs, to partner with local trade organizations and work organizations. But I think I have to be honest and say a lot more work in that area has to be done. A lot of people have to do better to increase the job opportunities for minorities in Rochester. That's just plainly evident given the circumstances of the high poverty rates in the city.
A couple questions around that. Because I think a lot of people are just excited to see all that development in that area. You know, what drew your company to be part of that, and do you think they're going to fill in any more of the loop?
What drove our company to be part of it is it's exactly the type of project that we like to be involved in, right? It's accomplishing something larger than just building housing. It's part of a larger and very well thought out plan. So it had this huge infrastructure investment by the city, and they created 7 development parcels plus what was created along Charlotte Street. So I think if you asked a lot of people what's happened on the inner loop, you might get a lot of opinions. And I think a lot of people don't realize the totality of what's occurred there. We've been one part. We've had other developers who are fantastic. Howard Konar, Krista, Pathstone, and obviously the Strong Museum of Play. But when all the buildings are done, Conifer, I should add, when all the buildings are done, more than 700 new units are going to be on the inner loop. We're part of 200 of those units. And I think it has been built in a way that's quite inclusive. If you took a look at it, I suspect you'd find what will be the most economically integrated community in certainly Monroe County. There's a wide range of housing units. A good percentage of them are for the formerly homeless. We've got units next door to each other along Charlotte Street that range in rent from $450 a month to almost $3,000 a month. And that's on basically what amounts to one block in the city of Rochester. So I think the city deserves a lot of credit for doing the planning, but as a community, a lot of people have done a lot of good work, and we're just glad to be a substantial part of it. I'm real proud of what's happened there. It's created a new street and done right by being inclusive.
So one of the biggest challenge after COVID is and will be housing deficit. And even with all the development that is going on in the city, we still struggle with workforce development. We still struggle with people who are not able to access to houses. So in your opinion, what's the future? How we can face and work together to develop better opportunities for the community in general in the city?
Yeah, well, that's certainly a huge topic. I'll try to think about it in two ways, right? One is first access to housing, right? Principally, there's just a huge housing crisis in the city of Rochester, and it's a housing crisis of market failure. It's built on a long history of principally racist policies that drove disinvestment in the city of Rochester, and the conditions of housing are quite poor. So one thing that certainly has to happen is like real direct interventions. Home leasing can play a part of that. One of the things that we've done over the last few years is try to find the worst housing in the city of Rochester in the worst condition, run by really unreputable reputable landlords, and we've tried to buy the housing, renovate it, maintain it for the current residents, so that they can move back when the renovations are done without facing a rent increase, and live in what would be quality housing run by reputable companies. So that's like an example of a direct intervention that's we need more of, and we need more funding to do. But we also have to work as a community to, the other side of that is how do you deal with just the lack of opportunity. I'm no expert on the school district, but I could tell you our education outcomes need to improve. So that's a real priority. But we also have to do work. I want to talk about what things that we could play a role in, right? And I get back to workforce development. There's a real crisis in the construction industry of not having enough of a future for tradespeople. We are desperate for finding people who want to join the construction industry, and there has to be a way to provide opportunities that can overcome what amounts to not a very good education for some people in the city of Rochester, and get them through to be successful in, I'll just use an example of the construction trades, where we don't have a crisis below wages, and there's lots of opportunity for the future. That's not going to solve all the world's problems, because there's lots of people who have to do a lot of things, but I just thought I'd speak to something that a company like Home Leasing would have more insight to, and could maybe actually do something about if everybody worked together well.
Well, thank you, Bret. We'll be back with more after these messages.
So Brent, one of the challenges that the industry is having right now is the price and the cost of the lumber. Are a lot of challenges after COVID. What's your perspective on how we can keep the cost low in order to create affordable? What's the strategies that your organization is using around that?
Yeah, I think there are things going on for which there's no strategy I could point to reduce the costs, right? There's nothing I could do to overcome a 30% increase in the cost of lumber in the short term, right? So we are seeing costs go up. I'm really alarmed about it, because it really, we're a developer, we're a general contractor, so it's not just about, it's harder to do projects and it's harder to create investment in a place like the city of Rochester. But as an affordable housing developer, less affordable housing is going to be built as it becomes more expensive. There's a real cap on how much in resources we can bring. So we have to be efficient in our design. We have to be efficient in our execution of projects. And honestly, I think the best ways that we can deal with the overall costs are a little bit outside the hard cost part of projects, right? And that's one thing I like about Home Leasing is we're a developer, we're a property manager, we're a contractor. So we have a lot of different parts and perspectives on a project. If, for example, we can build a project 3 months faster, we save an awful lot of interest, and that can help overcome. I don't know a good way to save other than just building well and having the right people to do it on the hard costs, because there's a lot of demands that are just making the prices higher. I think as a society, we have to work on some other big issues that are driving costs up. Insurance costs are astronomical, and there's something that can be done about insurance costs. I think lumber is going to come down as people start to ramp back up production. So I don't know that there's anything I can do that to effectuate it, but this is a really hard topic. We've been talking about the too high costs in the affordable housing industry for my whole career, financing affordable housing, which is 20 years, and I've never seen the costs go down. So I don't want to pretend that I have an idea to bring them down, because so far nobody's come up with one.
Right. How did your company adjust to working during COVID?
Well, yeah, this has been a really challenging year. but we've been successful despite those challenges as a company. In some ways, we've been fortunate as a developer of affordable housing. You know, the importance of affordable housing has really stayed a focus as a priority for the state and the federal government to allow to keep going despite shutdowns. So we never were required to stop the construction of our projects. We did have a couple times where we had to pause because there were cases of COVID among construction staff, but we were able to continue operations throughout the pandemic so far on the construction side. The real challenge and the real heroes, though, were on our property management team. Like I mentioned, we've got 3,000 apartments that we manage. A substantial number are among very vulnerable populations, seniors and supportive housing residents who have special needs. And I'm just in awe of how quickly our property management team responded and changed from one day to the next to the new requirements to help everybody keep safe, and the extra mile that people went to make sure that the seniors had things like food and had access and weren't having problems with the isolation. And you know, we did see some outbreaks here and there, as many have, and we have had colleagues who've been sick, and we've had colleagues whose parents have passed away as a result of the virus. So it's hit us pretty hard. I also want to point out that I'm real proud of our industry, you know, this affordable housing industry. A lot of people think of companies as only competitors, but I didn't see that. I saw all these companies come together and help each other. Construction companies sharing standards of practice to help keep construction sites safe. Property management companies helping, you know, share best practices of keeping residents safe. Everybody was on calls all the time together, just sharing. And I was quite impressed and proud that I work for an industry or in an industry there where people really just tried real hard to help each other.
And that is fundamental, I think, in terms of collaboration and the common efforts that not-for-profit, for-profit, the government, and everybody has done through this terrible pandemic that no one really didn't have any plans, you know, how to handle something so new and so different. So now, if we go one step further and we talk about Rochester economy and the perspectives, how you see the economy, and are we in front of a recovery, or what's your, now no one has a magic ball, but what's your perception and what's your perspective about Rochester economy?
Well, you know, I can take some big picture perspectives, and I guess I'll start with that. You know, Rochester tends to not benefit from the huge upswings, and our crashes tend to be less substantial. So, you know, overall, I can see the Rochester economy growing from this time, but it's not going to spike like we're going to see in other places. You know, fundamentally, Rochester's population's basically flat, regions growing slightly and shifts within the region. So, you know, we're resilient though. So I'm optimistic overall that we continue to be a good place to live and a good place to have companies like ours. But we have a fundamental problem that hasn't been addressed. Our segregation and the disparity of opportunity is it's almost no more pronounced than in any other place than in a place like Rochester, where the concentration of poverty is so high. So I can talk about the quality of life going up generally, but it's just not fairly distributed. And I want to say, though, that Rochester is a community that I think if we work together, we could be an example of addressing those inequalities and that lack of opportunity. It's a small enough place that you can actually have real impact. And we've seen, impact on really big and hard issues in the past. Again, I'm a housing nerd. I focus on housing, and I've seen this community address lead poisoning among children, right? I've seen this community address the foreclosure crisis. We've seen this community, build the inner loop in a way that is, I think, equitable and fair and a model. Probably not beyond some criticism, but a pretty darn good example of what should be done if we're going to do something big. I think we could actually do something if we put it as a primary purpose, and everyone's going to have to become a little less selfish and care more about people they may not know and people who may not run across.
Bret, thank you very much for being inspired and for working in this community and working together to build a better future for our city and our places. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure to be on.
Coming up next week on Be Inspired, we'll meet Luis Carrasquillo, owner of Munchie's Rock City Empanadas.
To watch today's episode and the complete interviews of our guests, go to rochesterfirst.com/beinspired. For more great talk with Rochester's entrepreneurs, listen to Bodette 97.1, Saturdays at 9 a.m. For Mauricio Riveros, I'm Julio Saenz. We'll see you next week on Be Inspired.